Cockroaches, spiders, penguins, cows, and humans. We all make milk-like fluids for our babies. Milk is the magic of mothering. In fact, penguins make something called a crop milk, and it's a fluid in the back of their throats, and their little babies, once they are born, can then be nourished by that. Pacific beetle cockroaches and Toxeus magnus spiders, they also make milky-like fluids for their little hatchlings. So the reality is that milk is not specifically mammalian. However, mammalian milk has been evolving for more than 310 million years. And humans during that time have specifically been evolving our human milk as well, so that we could survive in inhospitable places during traumatic times and in areas that we never, ever would have been able to. Breast milk is an evolutionary food, and in fact, none of you out there today would be here if it wasn't for human milk. Now, I have more certifications around breastfeeding and childbirth than anyone even know exists, right? I am a lactation consultant, board certified, a registered lactation consultant. I'm a certified childbirth educator, a certified lactation educator. I even have a degree in lactation consulting. It's a thing, it's a weird thing, but it is a thing. In spite of all that, I get surprised myself that I'm standing here today to talk to you about breastfeeding, about parenting. Because when I was a little girl, I wasn't, a kid who really dreamed about being a parent someday. I didn't really think about mothering. And when all of my friends were trying to get babysitting jobs, I was trying to avoid them because I thought that toddlers were terrifying. I didn't want to have anything to do with them. And even though I did have baby dolls, I was more interested in the dolls that actually did stuff. Like I had this wonderful doll called Baby Alive, and you would feed it food and you would feed it milk and it would poop and pee, and I thought that was the greatest thing ever, right? Oh, it was amazing. I thought about someday when I was going to grow up, and yet parenting wasn't a part of those dreams. I hadn't even considered it. I did have dreams. Right? I wanted to be a princess, and that didn't work out for me, but my family, I think, still thinks I'm a princess. But my real dream was I wanted to be the next Dian Fossey. I wanted to work with gorillas in the jungle. My father had worked with chimpanzees when I was a very little girl, and that really instilled a passion in me for primates. Plans change, things change, and for me, I fell in love very young with my husband of 30 years, still in love. Yay! Woohoo! And we got married very young, and my husband was in the military. We wound up in Guam, and again, the universe changed our plans. We were surprised with a pregnancy before that plan was ever going to be manifest, and so we decided just to dig in. We read all the books, we took all the classes, we did all the things, right? And my son had some other ideas. He decided to be butt down, he decided to be in a breech position, and so even though I had these dreams of having a natural childbirth and breastfeeding and all these fabulous things, the military informed me that I was going to have a planned surgical delivery. And so the night before he was set to arrive, I was woken up in the middle of the night and my belly was rolling and he was turning head down and my water broke, and I was so excited because I was going to get to have a vaginal birth. And we drove the hour across the dark island, and I was nothing but excited because I knew that I was going to avoid surgery. And we walked in to the hospital, and I was met with the military personnel who said, sorry, the surgeon has been woken up, and so we're going to do it his way. And that meant I had to have surgery, and it was a pretty trying time for me. My newborn baby wound up in the neonatal intensive care unit, and I wound up with some medical conditions, and the hospital had this really bizarre rule that you couldn't see your baby until you could walk to your baby. And so we were separated for more than a day and a half, and so breastfeeding was challenged. He had missed all of those early feeds with me. And our early days, our early weeks of breastfeeding were also very, very difficult. So the next time around, I thought, you know what? Been there, done that, had the bad birth experience, struggled through breastfeeding. I've got this time. And I planned a vaginal birth after cesarean. And I did have that. But I had some medical issues with that delivery, and I wound up with some pretty severe postpartum depression. And again, my relationship with breastfeeding with my child was an early one of struggle. We struggled for days, we struggled for weeks, but with both of my children, we managed to work it out for about a year. And I can tell you, as I look back at that time, and it still makes me pretty emotional, that I fell madly in love with my kids, even though it wasn't part of my plan. And they really ushered me into mothering, into parenting. But I did not love breastfeeding. I didn't, okay? And it wasn't until years later when I became a childbirth advocate, I became a labor doula, and I was a childbirth educator, and I was trying to learn a lot. And so I started diving into the research around human milk and lactation, and all of a sudden, like the sky lit up for me. I was amazed. I could not believe how incredible human milk was. And it was when I started to really discover the ancient origins and the role in human health that I fell passionately head over heels in love with human milk. And so I look back at my difficult births and my very difficult breastfeeding experiences, and I have nothing but gratitude. And my children really instilled this passion in me for what I've done for the past 20 years. And I'm so grateful for those boys. So I'm going to invite you back in time with me, back when humans were first evolving. And one of the things that happened for us is that we developed these incredible brains, really big brains. And we were upright primates. So what that meant is to deliver these giant brains, we had to give birth to babies that were relatively dependent. We had to get their brains through our pelvises. So that meant we had to hold babies. That meant we had to be skin to skin with them. We had to carry them for years. And so we created milk that was designed to nourish babies for many years. In fact, some anthropologists believe that human milk is designed to be fed for babies for 5 to 7 years. What was really going on that was ensuring survival was the fact that human milk is customized for each and every baby. It's like a milky microbrew. It's as though each and every parent is their own brewmaster for this child, making a unique fluid just for their baby. In fact, our human milk changes according to the foods that we eat, the bacteria that we are exposed to, the pathogens that we come in contact with, even where in the world we live. Human milk is evolutionary. And over time, our mammary glands started to evolve as well. But not for all mammals. There are still some mammals today that give birth to babies in very unique ways. We have some animals like the platypus, they still lay eggs. And when their little eggs hatch out, the babies have to swim up to them and they have to crawl up under their fur, and the mothers literally just leak milk out into the fur. And the babies have to lick all day long. Now, I can tell you, as a mother who breastfed, I remember feeling totally touched out at the end of the day. I was like, oh, wow, more of this? I can't imagine being a platypus mom and being licked head to toe. No. Okay, but I digress, right? The mammary gland is remarkable. The mammary gland is an evolutionary tool, and it has allowed us to thrive on most continents around the entire world. So long ago, there was a group of people who decided that they wanted to cross the Bering Strait. This was going to be a dangerous journey because they were going from an area of lots of sunlight to an area of very low sunlight. And some of you may know that we need sunlight to manufacture vitamin D in our bodies. Well, for the babies, this was going to be a struggle, because the way adults and children wound up dealing with this deficit of sunlight was they just ate a diet that was high in vitamin D. They were able to eat fatty fish, they were able to eat seal meat, they were able to accomplish getting enough vitamin D, but babies only had human milk. So an evolutionary change occurred. This is what researchers believe. They found a gene that allowed for more profuse ducts. so that the ducks could then suck vitamin D right out of the blood and put it into human milk. And so in this way, the babies were also able to survive. You can still see this genetic anomaly in the descendants from that ancient journey. Now, for me, I find stuff like this really wild and crazy and interesting. And every single year, we are seeing thousands of research articles that are published that have something to do with how important human milk is to human beings. When we provide human milk to babies, we are providing a very specific set of ingredients for those babies. And breast milk has inside it all sorts of genetic information. And it is provided to babies during a very important period of time. It is a period of time that we call the critical 1,000. The critical 1,000 occurs from the moments when babies are first conceived until they're about 1,000 days old. Now, what's going on during this period of development is all of our organ systems are in development, right? Our brains are rapidly growing, and it's also a period of time when our genes are most vulnerable to the environmental exposures. When we provide babies milk from another mammal or milk that is made from a plant, we are literally altering their destinies. We are changing the information, the recipes of information that go into those babies' bodies. So human milk contains genetic information. Within human milk, literally thousands of packages every day, which are called exosomes, are delivered inside the baby's body. And inside these exosomes are things called microRNAs and mRNAs. And what they are is they're little genetic messengers. And they communicate from one cell to another which genetic codes need to be activated and inactivated. We're shifting development. Another thing that we have in human milk are stem cells. Stem cells are pluripotent cells that can actually turn into any type of cell in the human body. And newer research has found that when mammals ingest their maternal mammalian milk, that those stem cells then go out into the body and they reside in the organ systems and the brains of the babies. And scientists believe that they stay here in order to help that child in times of illness and disease, to protect them for the rest of their lives. We also know now that human milk helps us to cultivate our microbiome. Now, we're only just now starting to discover how important and integral a microbiome is to a human body. So what our microbiome is it is all the fungi and the bacteria and the protozoa that live on and within us, and they work symbiotically within and outside our cells to keep us healthy. In fact, by the time you are an adult, you will be 60% microbial and only about 40% human. And so let me tell you, the type of bacteria that you are colonized with early on in the first critical 1,000 matters significantly. You want to be colonized with bacteria that is designed for human health. A large component of human milk is something called human milk oligosaccharides. These are unique sugars that for a long time scientists didn't know what they did because babies can't digest them. What we now know is they feed the bacteria. That's their job. So they're helping to attract bacteria, good bacteria, healthy bacteria to our gut, and they feed them, keep them healthy, and help them set up household. So our microbiome is so important because we now know it acts as an endocrine system. What that means is that the bacteria in our gut actually release hormones. We know that the bacteria in our gut are communicating through our vagus nerve to our brain and tell our brain to release hormones. And it's in this way that our microbiome helps to maintain our moods, helps to establish mood stability for the rest of our lives. We're also discovering that the microbiome plays a role in many organ systems' health, including our cardiac system. I mean, who knew that bacteria played a role in how healthy our heart is? It's pretty amazing. And very new research suggests that our microbiome also plays a role with our pheromones. Now, our pheromones help us become attracted to our mates, right? So for those of you parents who ever wanted to play a role in the partners that your kids may wind up with, I mean, maybe the only way to do that is to breastfeed them. I don't really know, right? But we have started to outsource human milk. We have started to outsource it to infant formula companies that are making milks out of cow's milk and plant milk. Now, I worry that we haven't really considered the long-term implications, particularly on evolution, for this. And we've gotten so used to outsourcing things as a community, right? We no longer need a memory. We've got Google. We don't have to read maps anymore. We have Waze. We don't have to walk anywhere. There's Uber, there's Lyft, there's electric scooters. We don't have to grow food. We don't even have to go to the grocery store. We can get food delivered right to us. We don't even have to have sex with a person. There's internet porn, right? I mean, let's be real. And we don't have to breastfeed our babies. There's artificial milk, right? And yet, when we outsource our baby's food, we are placing our evolution in the hands of pharmaceutical companies instead of our very own capable hands. Now, breastfeeding rates have gotten better over the past 2 decades in the United States, but let's not be complacent. Let's not be fooled that things are easier for families today. Breastfeeding, in fact, has gotten more difficult for families. Newer data now shows us that many families return to work by 2 weeks after they deliver. 2 weeks. I mean, you are not even healed at 2 weeks. And most of those families are returning to jobs where their employers don't support breastfeeding. They certainly don't support expression. And so for most of those families, they will wind up stopping breastfeeding much earlier than their anticipated goals. Infant formula companies have money, they have power, and they have influence. And they are using those resources in order to promote more artificial milk feeding to very vulnerable communities. So just as we evolve biologically, we evolve culturally. And it is now time for a cultural change because in this culture, it's harder than ever for us to breastfeed biologically. So when we think about this, there are some things we can do. We need to be reaching out to oppressed communities, communities that are under-resourced, particularly communities of color where we see lower breastfeeding rates, and we need to listen to them. We need to help find creative ways to improve access to human milk. We need to find better ways for any baby, particularly fragile babies, to access donor human milk. We need to have conversations about community milk sharing, where mother to mother, parent to parent, they share milk directly. And we also need to find realistic ways for parents to return to work and continue to human milk feed their children. And the reality is that we need to have paid maternity and paternity leave in this country so that we can get our parenting and breastfeeding off to the best start for our families. So, human milk, it's powerful. And I beg you not to give that power over, the power of our evolution, to someone else. And now that you know, if you're ever in trouble, if you ever have a problem, just squirt a little bit of breast milk on it. I'm Laurel Wilson. Thank you.